crafty friends, this is card number 41 in Full Deck Challenge 3. My postage stamp has these beautiful lime colors, which is what influenced my color scheme for today's card. I'm loving a little bit of citrusy lemon and lime today. I'm going to use my favorite color medium, which is my watercolor powders. I have a chartreuse, a lime green, and then a turquoise. I think those colors go really well together. For my collage bits, I have collected a few items that have a bit of yellow on, and I'm loving the one that has got the lemons. I think that's perfect. And then my carryover item from last week is going to be the ruffle. I'll incorporate a paper ruffle somehow in today's layout. And then lastly, the prompt for this week was Zig Zag. I've got a Zig Zag stencil, and although in the final result you don't really see it anymore, here is proof that I actually used it. So I'm going to start with my mini collage, which is going to go in my background. I'm just going to have a few different pieces of this collage paper, or just scraps really, and I'm going to lay them across onto the face of the card with some Mod Podge. You don't need very much because your card is really small. We're working on a small surface. It really is just a starting point for your card. I use Mod Podge almost for everything because it is on my desk, it's handy, I have lots of it, and I find it easy to use. But of course you can use whatever adhesive you have. You could use clear glue, craft glue, glue stick, but the glue stick also depends on what kind of playing cards you're using. The ones that have got a super shiny surface, the glue stick won't stick really well. If you have ones like mine which have what is called a linen finish, that would stick a little bit better. But I would suggest a more strong adhesive like a craft glue or a PVA. Now this mini collage that we usually do on our card, you can do it in any way you like. I tend to always tear strips and put them across. Sometimes I put them diagonally, sometimes coming down vertically. You can also do little smaller bits, more like a mosaic type. It really is up to you. You can overlap as much as you want to, and you can put as little or as much as you want. This really is just mini practice for collaging. And for me, it is the basis or the beginning of all my pieces, or most of my pieces. I tend to always start with collage. I think it brings beautiful texture and interest to the work. And even though you tend to cover up most of it, the bit that does shine through in the end adds so much to your piece. And then you'll notice I'm also adding Mod Podge over the pieces that I'm sticking down. This is because I'm going to be adding the watercolor powders later, which I will add with water, and I need to waterproof this. Otherwise, everything will just get super soggy and will more than likely tear. So adding the layer of Mod Podge over the top will give me a good surface to do my color work. I'm adding a few little bits of darker interest. These are little strips of tissue paper that I have black scribbles on. These are my scribbles that I've created. They are printed onto tissue paper, and they're part of a kit that is sold through ArtStacks. I'll put a link to the website in the description box below if you're interested. A challenge for myself in this deck was to keep a corner open so you can see that it is a playing card you're working on. In previous decks, I tend to cover everything up, which also doesn't matter if you do that. And in some cards that I've done so far, I have covered everything up. But I try to remember to keep something open. I'm successful most of the time. My next step, usually after collage, is adding gesso. This is to soften the background and to push everything into the background. If I leave it all quite bold and bright like it is, anything that I place on top is sort of going to be lost. This gesso softens the overall look and allows space for the focal point without drowning it out. I always tend to work with pieces bigger than what I need and then just trim off the excess instead of just trying to cut everything to size and trying to make it fit within the space. Just cut it bigger, stick it on, and then once everything is dry, you can trim off the excess. I think that's much easier. I'm now going to add my zigzags in the form of my stencil and some texture paste. If you don't have texture paste, you could also do this with gesso. It's just that gesso is a little bit thinner or runnier, so it tends to run under the stencil sometimes. That's what I find in my experience, where texture paste is thicker and sort of holds its shape a little better. But of course, if you don't have either, you could also just do some paint on a sponge and just dab it over the stencil to create the design. In all honesty, the stencil isn't the best. It is rather flimsy and it's not very stable because of the way it is cut. So I did get some texture paste sort of all underneath the design, and it didn't have very clear lines, but it works overall and it gives it some texture in the background. I think going forward, if I use the stencil again, I will just apply the texture paste in one direction along the zigzags, which I think will make for a smoother application. But there they are, and they work. And then I dropped it on its face. Okay, not much damage done. If anything, it's added additional texture. Once the texture paste is nice and dry, I'm going to start adding my watercolor powders. I'll start with the lightest color first. These are super concentrated, so you only need a few sprinkles. You can't see much now in the video, but you'll see as soon as I add the water, how vibrant they become. So you just sprinkle a few little granules of the watercolor powder and then add water with a spray bottle. This brand that I'm using is by Ken Oliver. It's called Color Burst. I only have 6 colors in that. They are actually rather pricey, but let me tell you that they last really, really long. I use mine very often because they are my favorites, but I've had them for at least 4 years. So I think it is worth the investment. Look at those beautiful, vibrant colors, the way they blend, and the light and dark tones they create. You can always add more powder if you want more color, and you can also add water first if you like, and then add the watercolor powder. You can try and experiment different ways of using these. They are super fun. Just a note, this video is not sponsored by Color Burst powders. It's just my genuine opinion on these watercolor powders and how much I love them. I'm not getting any commission if you go and buy some. I just truly, truly love them. And you can see they don't lose their color intensity when they are dry. My background is done. I'm happy with that. We're now going to work on the focal point and the design elements of this card. I need to incorporate my postage stamp somehow, and then I have this gold zebra that is really left field, but I want to add it in today's card. And while I move these elements around trying to find the perfect layout, I can tell you that next week's prompt is feathers. So I need to create a paper ruffle, as that is my carryover item from last week. I'm going to use some tissue paper, and I have this piece that has some turquoise splatter on from some previous project, and I thought it would be interesting to use it. So here is my tissue paper ruffle, and I'll put it behind my zebra. That'll help just the focal point stand out. To add to the theme of zigzag, I could also say that the stitching that I used on my paper ruffle is also zigzag. So the prompt is incorporated in there too. And then I managed to get a little bit of turquoise color at the bottom of my zebra. Not ideal, but we'll try and cover up that later. Although in hindsight, watching the video back now, it didn't really make a difference. I could have just left it, but I did try to cover it up with a little bit of gesso just to make that less obvious. While that's drying, I'm going to glue down my ruffle. I'm just going to use some craft glue, just a thin line of glue down the center of where I want the ruffle to be, and then I place the ruffle on top. I wasn't quite sure what to do with my postage stamp. I liked it on the right hand side there, but I found that it would cover the 2 of hearts, and that would sort of defeat the purpose of keeping the corner open. I should have perhaps put my zebra to the right at the bottom instead of the left. So I'm just trying to see where else the stamp can go. I also have this cute little heart. It's a die cut in turquoise with the gold trim, and I'm going to use that somewhere. Before I stick anything down, I'm going to add some contrast, and I'm going to do this by putting some black splatter. This is just watered down black acrylic paint. You can join in this full deck challenge at any time and on any card. This is deck 3. We do have 2 other decks that I've done in previous years. I'll put the playlists to those decks in the description box below. And also, if you're on Facebook, you can join my group there. Just search Full Deck Challenge Group. The idea behind this is to try new techniques, experiment with different mediums, and to think outside of the box and to come out of your comfort zone. We're working on a really small surface, so it's not overwhelming or intimidating. And it's really perfect if you're just starting out in mixed media. But most of all, it's fun. I'm going to let a little bit of the zebra die cut sort of stick off the page at the bottom and the side. I don't always like everything sort of confined within the small space. And because I'm going to use my postage stamp sort of like a tab, it's going to be sticking off the card, this will create some balance. So I decided to put the postage stamp on the top left like a tab, and I'm just going to run that under the sewing machine with some zigzag stitching again, just to hold that in place. And I'm going to put that little heart on the zebra's bottom. That does sound a little bit odd, but you can see what I mean. I personally think that looks cute. And I'm just cutting out a little funky sentiment from Blooming Marvelous ephemera stack. This is available from Funky Fossil, and I love adding cute elements like this to my work. You'll also notice when I put it in place how it creates contrast and also balance with the black splatter and the hooves of the zebra. Thank you so much for taking the time to watch. I really hope you enjoyed this week's card and were inspired to decorate your own plain card and maybe even join in the full deck challenge if you haven't already. Don't forget to subscribe to my channel and then also hit the little bell so you're notified every time I upload new content. Thanks again for watching. Don't forget to keep it quirky. I wish you happy creating, and I'll see you again soon. Bye.